I always knew something was off when the recycling bin came back in empty. That might sound ridiculous, but my wife was militant about rinsing jars and flattening cardboard. She treated trash day like a religious ritual. And yet there it sat, completely untouched, on a Tuesday morning when she swore she'd be working from home and catching up on errands. The moment I saw it, my stomach didn't drop, it clenched, like a muscle tightening around a knife it knew was coming. It's funny how the smallest inconsistencies can feel like bombs going off when you're living in what you thought was normal. I didn't make a scene. I didn't ask her why the recycling hadn't been taken out or why our neighbor's dog, who adored her, suddenly growled when she passed. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, took note of the single wine glass in the sink still wet from rinsing, and smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I'd only bought that exact Bordeaux for our anniversary next week, and we hadn't touched it. So who did? That's when I started noticing things in stereo. A second phone charger tucked behind the couch. Two separate playlists showing up on our smart speaker history, one hers, one full of trap remixes and R&B that she used to say gave her migraines. And then there was the gym bag. I opened the hall closet to grab my jacket before a work call, and there it was, still zipped but reeking faintly of sweat and cheap cologne, except she hadn't been to the gym in over 2 weeks, not since she threw her back out during yoga class. She'd been milking that excuse like it paid rent. So I waited. That week, she told me she had a book club on Thursday night. It used to be Mondays. I told her to enjoy. I kissed her cheek and even offered to drop her off. She declined, obviously. The second she left, I walked over to the Wilsons' house, our next-door neighbors, under the pretense of borrowing a drill. Martha Wilson greeted me like I was her nephew returning from war, which is odd, because 3 weeks ago she gave me a 10-minute lecture on hedge trimming. That's when I knew. I'm not trying to make drama, I told her. But something's going on with Sarah. And I think you know more than you're saying. Her face froze like I just accused her of poisoning the local duck pond. I didn't say anything because, well, you didn't hear it from me, okay? She said, then told me that Sarah had been seen leaving Dan Muller's house on multiple occasions. Dan Muller, our neighbor 3 doors down, recently separated, midlife crisis type with a Jeep Wrangler, he waxed more than he showered. According to Martha, they'd been spotted at the same farmer's market 2 towns over on 3 separate weekends. Always standing too close. Always without their wedding rings. I thanked her, went home, and started mapping everything out. The wine, the playlists, the shifting schedule, the phantom gym bag. All breadcrumbs leading to a very predictable gingerbread house of betrayal. But I didn't yell. I didn't confront her. Instead, I played dumb, spent the next few days being extra affectionate, and started quietly collecting receipts, photos, timestamps, copies of her texts from the family iPad she never thought to log out of. She told her lover she felt alive with him. Funny, because she hadn't touched me in weeks. The next step wasn't about confrontation, it was about contamination. If she was going to spread her filth behind my back, I'd spread her truth in front of everyone's face. So I printed a neat packet. Nothing dramatic. Just a simple dossier, a summary page, annotated screenshots, timestamped call logs. I slid them into envelopes and delivered them, one by one, to every household on our street during my morning jog, just another friendly neighbor dropping off invitations to reality. I gave the HOA president a separate folder with a cover letter. As a concerned spouse and resident, I thought you should be aware of behavior that contradicts our neighborhood values. That Friday, I stayed home. Not to confront her, but to watch the show. The silence from the street was louder than a riot. No kids outside. No joggers. Just blinds subtly shifting, neighbors peeking, text flying. When Sarah came home and waved at the Hendersons across the street, they pretended not to see her. That night, she tried to set up the projector for our weekly movie night. I told her I wasn't feeling well. The truth is, I was watching our neighborhood group chat light up like Times Square. Someone had anonymously uploaded her full dossier to the Better Suburbia Facebook group, something about infidelity awareness. She asked me if I noticed people acting strange. I just shrugged and said, maybe they know something you don't. Her smile faltered. And that was the first crack. Not in our marriage, that was already dust. But in her reality. We used to have this little Saturday morning ritual, eggs, coffee, her curled up at the table flipping through some self-help book, me on the porch skimming headlines, half joking that I'd start therapy the day the houseplants started talking back. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours, and for a while I thought that kind of quiet meant we were doing something right. But then it started, the slow, sneaky unraveling. Not a storm, not a fight, not even a bad week. Just edits. Rewrites of the woman I married. First, she started going for solo walks after dinner, said she needed mental clarity. I offered to join once or twice, and she said, "It's not about exercise, it's about decompression." I let it go, assuming she was working through something internal, maybe stress. But then she started talking about energetic boundaries. That's what she called it. She read it in a book, she said, how we shouldn't be so emotionally enmeshed as a couple, how she needed space to evolve as an individual. I nodded like I understood, but it didn't feel like growth. It felt like being erased. Slowly, quietly. One evening, she came home with a new tattoo on her ribs. Not something small, either. Some long, angular symbol that looked like it belonged in a cult or on a yoga studio wall. She hadn't told me she was even considering one. When I asked what it meant, she just smiled and said, "It's for me." Like the question itself was invasive. That's when the energy shifted. She didn't just grow distant, she grew alive. Vibrant. Like someone plugged her into a socket and charged her with 1,000 volts of false enlightenment. She'd stay up late watching weird indie documentaries about reclaiming female identity or listening to podcasts hosted by women with breathy voices and names like Phoenix or Luma. She started journaling pages and pages of handwritten affirmations and mantras and goals. And I was never in them. She told me she wanted to launch her own wellness brand. A platform, she said, for women like me who feel lost. I offered to help with branding or logistics, my background's in marketing. She waved me off. I wanted to be pure, she said. Uninfluenced. That stung more than I admitted. She started hiding her phone more, too, not outright, but subtly. No more leaving it face up on the table. Notifications went silent. She changed her passcode, said it was part of her digital detox. She untagged herself from old photos of us on Instagram, locked down her profile, said she was creating a professional presence. One night, I noticed she'd made a second account when I wasn't following. I didn't bring it up. I wanted to believe she had her reasons. I wanted to believe she was still my wife, just evolving. And maybe I was the one stuck in place. One afternoon, I borrowed her car because mine had a flat. I found a small bottle of cologne in the glove compartment, not mine. It was tucked into a reusable shopping bag alongside a cheap bracelet and an empty pack of gum. When I asked if she'd had a friend in the car recently, she blinked, too slow, and said she gave a coworker a ride. Why? She asked, smiling. You're not jealous, are you? I laughed it off. But it stuck. Like a sliver under the skin, invisible and irritating. She started scheduling more retreat weekends with friends. Women I'd never met. Always in different towns, always places with names like Moonstream or Gaia Rich. She'd come back smelling different, like smoke and citrus and something foreign I couldn't place. She stopped wearing her wedding ring. Said it didn't fit her vibe anymore. I asked her once if everything was okay. She kissed my forehead and said, "You're safe, don't worry." But she never answered the question. She used to share playlists with me, songs we'd slow dance to in the kitchen, soft acoustic covers, and old 90s ballads. Now her music was loud, angry, heavy with bass and heartbreak. I found an AirPod once wedged between the couch cushions, playing a song on loop called No Apology. It had a line that said, "I don't owe you closure, I owe myself truth." That night, she told me she'd booked a solo trip to Sedona. I need to reconnect with my spirit, she said, like her soul had gone on vacation without her and she needed a plane ticket to catch up. I smiled and said I hoped she found what she was looking for. But I already knew what she had found, someone else. Maybe not officially, maybe not even physically yet, but emotionally? She was gone, floating further every day. I kept pretending not to see it because the lie was more comforting than the silence that would come after the truth. But it was there, in the way she no longer asked how my day was, in the way she locked the bathroom door when she never used to, in the way her hugs felt rehearsed, her laughter delayed. She was still smiling. But that smile didn't include me anymore. It was a Tuesday night, late enough that the house was quiet and even the refrigerator had stopped humming, and I was sitting at the dining table trying to troubleshoot the Wi-Fi router, because she'd mentioned earlier that her Zoom mentorship group kept glitching out, something about energetic resonance interfering with technology, she said, laughing like it was cute. But when I opened the admin panel, I noticed something odd. The connection log showed a device named Jay's iPhone had been on our network consistently for the past 4 nights, from about 10:30 p.m. to 2 a.m. We didn't know anyone named Jay. My blood didn't run cold. My hands didn't shake. I simply sat there, watching the screen for another full hour, and sure enough, at 10:32 p.m., the device reconnected. Upstairs, I heard the water running in our shower. She always claimed to take late-night showers now to wash the day off, part of her new mindfulness routine. That night, I didn't even blink. I walked to the hallway, passed the stairs without making a sound, and stood by the back door. I unlocked it slowly, then stepped outside and moved quietly around the house until I was beneath our bathroom window. Steam billowed out slightly, but I heard something more distinct than water, a second voice. Male. Low, not even trying to be quiet. And then her laugh, that breathy, high-pitched giggle she used to reserve for inside jokes with me, now echoing through the humid air like an insult. I didn't peek in. I didn't want visuals. I needed proof. I pulled out my phone, opened the home security app, and checked the living room camera feed. Nothing. But when I checked the guest room camera, one she didn't know I'd installed after she started her solo healing sessions, there it was. A man's duffel bag on the floor. A pair of scuffed sneakers she would have hated. A hoodie slung over the chair. It was all there, laid out like a display in a betrayal museum. That's when something inside me turned off. No rage. No heartbreak. Just the sound of an old switch flipping, like the universe was giving me permission to stop pretending. I stepped back inside, moved like a ghost through the hall, and sat down at my desk. I opened a document, created a new folder titled Exit Plan, and began organizing everything. That night, I didn't sleep. I listened. I listened to their movements upstairs, the creaking floorboards, the soft thud of her closet door opening, the clink of hangers, maybe packing a few things for him, maybe showing him that new robe I bought her last Christmas. Around 2:07 a.m., I heard the front door open and close. I watched on the camera feed as a tall man in a beanie and track pants exited my house like he belonged there. He didn't run. He wasn't nervous. He just adjusted his collar, checked his phone, and walked down the street like he'd be back tomorrow. She never mentioned him. Never hinted. She climbed into bed 20 minutes later, smelling faintly of lavender and something that wasn't soap, and kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. I pretended to stir but said nothing. I lay there perfectly still, eyes open, facing the ceiling fan as it rotated above me like the slow blade of some divine judgment. That was the moment. Not when I saw the evidence, not when I heard the voice, but when she had the audacity to kiss me. That kiss was the real shatter point. The final insult. A mockery wrapped in the illusion of affection. That was when I stopped being a husband and became an executioner. I began mentally cataloging names. Friends. Neighbors. Coworkers. I started planning timelines, rehearsing movements, building the architecture of a reckoning that wouldn't just expose her, it would eviscerate her. I didn't need revenge immediately. I needed precision. She would fall, not with a scream, but with silence, slowly, as every support in her life was ripped out from under her until she was left standing alone in a house full of lies. I didn't say a word. I kissed her forehead the next morning before she left for work, packed her smoothie with her favorite turmeric blend, and told her to have a beautiful day. She smiled, told me I was her rock. And that's when I knew she had no idea I was already chiseling away at the foundation. She had no idea I was watching her, not just physically, but digitally, psychologically, strategically. I didn't confront her, didn't ask questions I already knew the answers to, didn't give her the satisfaction of knowing she had me confused or rattled. That version of me, the husband trying to understand her emotional awakening, died the night she let another man sweat in our guest bed. From that point on, I became something else. I moved through our home like air, like silence, like an algorithm. First, I mirrored her calm. I matched her tone, her energy. I even asked about her retreat plans with a curious smile and an offer to help book her flights, knowing full well she'd already booked them 2 weeks ago, not for Arizona, as she claimed, but for Portland. I knew this because I'd installed tracking software on her laptop while she was in the shower the morning after I caught Jay's iPhone logging onto our Wi-Fi. It wasn't invasive, it was necessary. She used to say transparency was love. I figured I was just giving her the love she deserved. Within 48 hours, I had access to her browsing history, email drafts, and app usage. She wasn't deleting anything, she was hiding it in plain sight. The emails weren't graphic, but they were worse, emotionally indulgent. Things like, "You help me feel seen," and "I've never been this honest with anyone before," which, when you've been married for almost a decade, is code for, "I've rewritten our entire history without you in it." I didn't react. Instead, I created a dummy email address and began contacting life coaches and spiritual guides who followed her on Instagram. I posed as a woman looking for a supportive female-led empowerment community, just to see what circles she was moving in. Within a week, one of them sent me a group calendar invite for a private retreat at a rented cabin 3 towns over. The same weekend, she told me she was flying out of state. Her name was listed in the attendee list as co-facilitator. She was building something behind my back, an entire new identity, and I wasn't even a footnote in it. That was the second confirmation. I wasn't just being cheated on physically, I was being deleted from her narrative. That's when I escalated. I stopped following her and started following her best friend, Clara, the one who suddenly became a frequent character in Sarah's stories. Clara and I are doing hot yoga. Clara's teaching me about crystals. Clara's going through a rough patch with her guy. So I'm staying with her tonight. Clara had always been flaky, but her Instagram was her weakness. I created a burner profile, female, complete with aesthetic photos and vague captions. Within a day, Clara accepted my follow request. She was private, but not cautious. She posted everything, their wine nights, the cabin photos, even a blurry shot of my wife on a hiking trail, seated beside a tall man whose face was cropped just enough to protect his identity but whose watch, hoodie, and posture matched the man who left our house at 2:07 a.m. While Sarah told me she was meditating with a shamanic therapist, she was sipping rose on a balcony I recognized from an Airbnb listing I had just pulled up using our shared bank statement. The payments were under the name Soulnest Properties. I traced the booking through the confirmation email she tried to delete, but her cloud backup hadn't synced properly. Everything was still there. I downloaded every attachment, every message, every invoice, and then I baited her. One night while she scrolled through her phone, I casually asked if she had any interest in visiting Oregon someday. She replied instantly, "I was never leaving the screen. No, not really. Too cloudy for me." That lie, so easy, so practiced, told me everything I needed to know. She didn't just cheat. She erased her shame. She repainted the walls while standing in the ashes. The final piece came from a group photo. Clara posted it to her story, and I screen recorded it before she could delete it. Sarah was in the center, leaning into the same man who had once leaned against our refrigerator while I was on a work trip, eating my food, drinking my wine, wearing the scent of my shampoo. I didn't explode. I didn't cry. I created another folder, this one labeled Witnesses, and began collecting names of people who liked the post, commented with fire emojis and heart eyes. These weren't strangers. These were people who'd eaten at our table, toasted to our anniversaries, smiled at me while knowing they were part of her shadow life. I began drafting a list, not just for exposure, but for surgical strikes. Every person who enabled her, who validated her duplicity, would be part of her downfall. But not yet. Not loud. Not messy. Not obvious. First, I would smile. I would hold her hand during meditation. I would bring her tea while she journaled about forgiveness and release. And when the time was right, I would make sure the world saw the truth not just about her infidelity, but about her hypocrisy, her performance, her hollow, curated persona. She thought she was evolving. She had no idea I was evolving too. Into something far colder. Far sharper. A man no longer trying to save his marriage, but one preparing to salt the earth it stood on. It happened at her launch party, the grand unveiling of her new conscious living brand, all sleek branding and minimalist hors d'oeuvres, surrounded by fake influencers, chakra coaches, and middle-aged women in linen pantsuits nodding solemnly about shadow work while sipping champagne. She wore white, of course, like some reborn goddess, greeting everyone with that saccharine smile she'd perfected, the one that made people believe she radiated wisdom and healing instead of deceit and rot. I arrived late on purpose, just as she was about to begin her speech, and the moment she saw me, her eyes flickered, not with surprise, but with something else, something cautious. She didn't expect me to be there. I hadn't RSVP'd, hadn't liked a single promo post, hadn't commented on the announcement where she thanked everyone who supported this journey. That was intentional. I let her believe I was retreating into silence, into defeat. I let her believe I'd become one of those quietly devastated husbands, the kind who fade into the background and eventually file for divorce with a whimper. Instead, I had spent the past month crafting the reveal to precision. So I smiled back at her, walked through the sea of curated nonsense, and took my place at the back of the room, behind the tech table where the presentation laptop was connected to a projector where her slideshow was about to begin. "Thank you for being here," she said into the mic, glowing under warm lighting as her first slide, a generic image of a sunrise, and the phrase, "Awaken your inner voice," filled the screen. She began to speak, the usual mix of pseudo-spiritual jargon and TED Talk wannabe confidence, But then she clicked to the next slide. And it wasn't the next slide. It was a photo of her in bed, laughing, hair messy, with her hand draped across the bare chest of a man whose face was clearly visible. The room froze. Not in outrage, just in confusion. A few polite gasps. Then another slide. Another photo. This time at the retreat cabin, her in leggings and a crop top, straddling him on a picnic table while another attendee snapped the picture. I let 5 images roll before stepping forward. She was frozen. Her hand trembled on the clicker. "You uploaded the wrong file," I said, calm, loud enough for everyone to hear. Or maybe I did. Hard to tell. That's when the murmurs began. Someone whispered her name. Someone else, Clara, I think, stepped backward and started rapidly swiping through her phone. My wife, finally snapped back into motion. "It's not what you think," she blurted, her voice cracking under the weight of 100 eyes. This was taken out of context. Her eyes were darting now, looking for exits that didn't exist. "These were private." "You had no right," I interrupted, still calm. "Private moments with another man? On retreats you told me were for healing? With people you swore you barely knew." She took a step forward, eyes pleading now. "You don't understand. I was lost. I needed someone, to remind me who I am. It wasn't about him. It was about me." I raised a hand slowly. "Please, don't insult me. Not in front of all your guests." She paused, blinking rapidly, face flushing red as the room fell deeper into its quiet tension. Then, as if following a script, she switched tones, her voice sharpened. "You never paid attention to me. You never saw me. I tried to talk to you for years and you just faded. This didn't happen in a vacuum." I nodded slowly. "So it's my fault. That you lied, hid, manipulated." Her lips curled slightly, her face twisting into something defiant. "At least I didn't stalk my own wife and sabotage her career just because my ego couldn't handle her growth." A few people gasped. One woman near the front took a step toward her as if to intervene, then froze. That's when I spoke again, carefully, deliberately, each word weighted like an anchor. "Growth doesn't require betrayal. Empowerment doesn't involve deception. And you didn't evolve, you escaped accountability by rebranding it as enlightenment." Her mouth opened, then closed again. No defense came. Only flickers of panic in her eyes. "You think these people are here for your vision," I said softly, almost kindly. "But they're watching a collapse, not a launch." Her breath caught. The confidence shattered. She looked around and for the first time realized the silence wasn't admiration, it was judgment. She tried to laugh, a brittle little sound that died on contact. "You think this ruins me," she said, voice shaking but eyes flickering with desperation. "You think this destroys everything I've built?" I leaned in slightly, just enough so she could hear the final blow. "I haven't even started yet." And then I stepped back. Let the silence thicken. Let the audience process. I didn't leave. Not yet. I wanted her to feel it, not just the exposure, but the isolation, the unraveling, the total, excruciating awareness that the performance was over, the mask had fallen, and all that remained was a woman surrounded by mirrors reflecting her own lies. She cornered me in the hallway just 20 minutes after the party imploded, the room behind us still thick with awkward whispers and quickly aborted conversations. People pretending to check their phones while eavesdropping on the collapse of the woman they'd praised an hour earlier. Her face was flushed with panic and fury, mouth twitching with unsaid accusations, and when she finally spoke, it came out in a vicious hiss, like a pressure cooker losing its last ounce of restraint. "You smothered me," she spat, eyes wide and desperate. "You always needed to control everything. My schedule, my choices, even my thoughts." I said nothing. Just watched her unravel, hands clenched at her sides, heels tapping erratically on the tile like a nervous tick she couldn't control. "You think you're so righteous," she snapped, her voice rising. "But you're pathetic. You wouldn't even fight for me. You just watched me slip away and did nothing until you got vindictive." I met her eyes, slowly, and said evenly, "I didn't fight because you weren't worth the war." She blinked as if I'd slapped her, stumbled a step back, then quickly masked it with venom. "You were boring. Predictable. Always playing it safe. I needed more than that. I needed someone who made me feel alive." I tilted my head slightly. "And you chose a man who sells crystals from the back of his car." Her jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. "You don't get to mock me. You don't know what it's like to live with someone who just fades. You stopped seeing me years ago." I let the silence hang for a second before replying. "No, I saw you. That's why I kept trying. But you only saw yourself." She started pacing now, pacing like a trapped animal, her fingers dragging through her hair, her breath coming in fast bursts. "This is your fault," she said, barely coherent. "You made me feel small. Like nothing I did was ever enough. You made me need him." I stepped closer, not threatening, just near enough so she could feel the gravity of what I was about to say. "No one makes you cheat. You did that all by yourself. You don't get to blame your cowardice on my decency." Her face twisted. She looked for a target, any weakness, any crack in the armor, and when she couldn't find one, she lashed out with whatever was left. "You're not a real man. Real men fight for their wives. Real men don't hide behind spreadsheets and plans and cold glares." I let her words hang in the air like smoke, then replied so quietly she had to lean in. "A real man doesn't fight to keep someone who's already sold themselves." Her breath caught. Just slightly. Just enough for me to know that landed exactly where I meant it to. "You're so cold," she whispered, now trembling not from rage, but from fear. "You used to hold me. You used to write me notes. You used to care." I looked her dead in the eye. "You used to be someone worth writing to." Her lips quivered. She reached for anger again, anything to break through the wall, but it was like watching a spark try to catch in the middle of a rainstorm, futile, pitiful. "You'll regret this," she muttered. "You think you're winning now, but you'll wake up alone, and it'll hit you. You pushed away the only person who ever truly loved you." I didn't even blink. "No. You killed that person, and I buried her tonight." Her eyes welled up, but not with real sorrow, just a performative grief she hoped would spark something in me. I didn't flinch. I didn't soften. That's when she realized it, really realized it, that nothing she said would touch me anymore. Not the guilt, not the insults, not the desperation. She had spent so long playing puppet master, pulling strings and shaping narratives, thinking I was just another character in her little story of self-discovery and reinvention. But now the story was over, and I was no longer playing the role she wrote for me. She started to speak again, something about how we could fix it, how we owed it to the history we shared, but her voice cracked halfway through, and all I did was tilt my head and say, "Don't confuse history with worth. Not everything old is sacred." She froze. That was the moment it all sank in. The affair. The party, the photos, the lies, and the worst part, my indifference. That I didn't yell, that I didn't cry, that I didn't beg, that I had looked into the eyes of the woman I once loved and felt absolutely nothing. She stepped back, trembling, not from anger now, but from something far worse, powerlessness. And I stood still, composed, unmoved, letting her drown in the silence she had created. She thought silence meant surrender, that my calm was hesitation, that my stillness was the limp wrist posture of a man too heartbroken to retaliate. But the truth was far simpler and far more dangerous. I was observing, calculating, positioning every piece like a chess master 3 moves from checkmate, already watching the queen crumble while she danced circles around pawns, believing herself untouchable. The day after the party, while she spiraled through damage control, texting Clara, deleting posts, crafting a public narrative of a deeply personal betrayal, I was quietly assembling my arsenal. Every image, every message, every calendar event she forgot to scrub, every audio file, every recorded login from Jay's iPhone, every timestamped bank statement from her secret retreats, it was all cataloged in a private drive. One with mirrored backups on 2 encrypted flash drives, one of which now sits in a safety deposit box she doesn't know exists. I changed all my passwords, locked down our joint finances. I moved half our savings into a separate legal trust under my name, something she couldn't touch without a court order, and the remaining joint funds, well, I let those sit just long enough for the bank to flag suspicious activity when she tried to book a retreat property under our LLC the following week. I reported it as unauthorized use. Access, denied. The Tesla, my name on the lease. The house, my inheritance, titled solely in my name since the day we closed. She thought her name on the mailbox meant security. It didn't. I quietly notified the utility companies and had all accounts transferred back to me. Her credit card, the one I paid off every month because I believed in financial partnership, canceled. The second she tried to buy her signature green juice and got declined, the first domino fell. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to announce it. I let the systems do the work. Then came the career piece. Her brand, her precious wellness empire, had one fatal flaw. She built it while still employed at her corporate job, using sick days to attend soul expansion, retreats, billing business expenses on the company card, and worst of all, posting her workshops online while tagging her employer in her bio. I gathered every screenshot, compiled every sick day she'd taken against each timestamped Instagram story. Then I sent it, not from my account, not with my name, to her company's HR department in a clean PDF folder titled Professional Conduct Concerns. I didn't accuse. I presented. They replied within 36 hours. She was placed on leave pending investigation. She cried about it 2 nights later, blaming the stress of public betrayal, and I just nodded sympathetically, handed her a blanket, and walked away. That same day, I filed for divorce. Quietly. Efficiently. My lawyer was surgical, prepped every motion with the evidence I'd gathered, framed the infidelity as emotional and reputational damage, structured the custody arrangement to ensure full control of the home should children ever enter the equation. There were none now, but the clause mattered. It was leverage. Meanwhile, I sent polite, direct messages to her parents. Not angry ones. Just facts. I included a summary, links to the private gallery with password access, and said, I thought you should know what I've been living with before you hear it from others. Her mother called me in tears. Her father sent a single text, she's lost herself. I'm sorry. Her friends were next. Not with venom. With precision. I created a Dropbox folder labeled, For Those Who Care, and shared it with her 5 closest friends. Each file was named after a date she lied to me. Inside, the truth. Messages, photos, audio clips of her late-night affirmations to the man she was healing with while I was cooking her dinner. 3 of the 5 blocked her by the end of the week. The other 2 messaged me to say they had no idea. One even thanked me. And then, just as she began posting vague, flowery captions about rebuilding, I released the final wave, a slow drip campaign on social media. Not public call-outs. Just anonymous screenshots, gentle nudges. Reddit threads. Facebook group leaks. Forums she once used to gain clients now filled with questions like, is this the same Sarah who? Her reputation began to bleed, not in a scandal, but in slow, continuous whispers. People stopped responding to her business inquiries. Clients rescheduled indefinitely. Collaborators ghosted her. And I said nothing. I simply watched. Because she thought she had time. She thought she could rebuild, twist the narrative, regain control. But she didn't realize the ground she was standing on was already gone. That every platform, every support beam, every illusion she had clung to had already been dismantled while she posed in sunlit fields talking about divine alignment. She still posted, still smiled, still clung to the idea that she could salvage the version of herself she sold to the world. But I was already in the background, flipping switches, pulling wires, letting it all burn, not in fire, but in silence, in precision, in inevitability. She doesn't know yet, but she will. The fall has already begun. The day of her fall was a fundraiser. Ironic, really, considering the cause was emotional integrity and leadership, and she was scheduled to speak as the final guest, the one with the longest bio, the boldest headline, the most curated smile. She walked in like a woman reborn, wrapped in white again, her usual spiritual armor, radiating the kind of performative calm that only the guilty can perfect. She didn't know what was coming. Or maybe she did. Maybe the silence from her inner circle, the unread texts, the way her mother's voice had sounded tight and cold the night before had stirred something, but she buried it like she buried everything else that threatened her version of reality. I was already there when she arrived, seated in the second row, not front and center, just close enough for her to see me the moment she stepped onto the stage. Our eyes locked, and for a moment, I saw a flicker, something behind the polished facade, something resembling doubt. But she smiled anyway. She always did. She moved through the crowd, offering hugs, forced laughter, a few grateful bows of her head to the applause that was lighter than usual, less enthusiastic, thinner. The speaker before her wrapped up, and as she took the mic, the silence that followed was dense, not anticipation, but the quiet you hear before a building collapses. She launched into her speech, the usual blend of shallow wisdom and faux humility, but there was a tremor in her voice on the 3rd slide. She noticed a man in the back, a former client who used to repost every one of her quotes, turn away when she made eye contact. Another woman she'd tagged in a recent Sisterhood Circle story stood up halfway through and walked out, heels clicking a little too fast. The room was shifting. Her mask was cracking. And then the screens behind her flickered. Just a moment. Barely noticeable. But enough to rattle her rhythm. Enough to derail the polished script she had rehearsed in front of a mirror for weeks. Then the images appeared, not from her presentation, but from the folder I had time to stream through the AV system remotely, cued perfectly at the moment her voice hit that practiced pitch of false inspiration. A photo of her in the guest room, her hand tracing another man's jawline. A cropped video of her whispering, "I love you," to someone who wasn't me. Screenshots of messages, lined up like bullets, each time-stamped, each damning. She froze. The audience didn't gasp. They didn't have to. They just watched. Silent. Some stunned. Some shaking their heads slowly. Some already picking up their phones, texting God knows who. Her lips parted, tried to speak, but no sound came. She blinked too fast, clutched the clicker like it was a weapon she no longer knew how to use. This was hacked, she tried, her voice cracking under the weight of 100 eyes. She laughed. A high, desperate sound that bounced awkwardly against the walls. "It's being taken out of context," she added, scanning the room for anyone, willing to nod. No one did. Her mother, seated near the back, stood up quietly and walked out without a word. Her father followed. Clara, her best friend once glued to her side at every event, was already standing beside me. "She lied to all of us," Clara whispered. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just watched. That's what destroyed her. Not the images. Not the whispers. Not the slow erosion of the audience's faith. It was me standing still, watching her drown in her own deceit without lifting a hand. She looked at me like I'd become something she didn't recognize. Not the man she once manipulated, but the man who no longer needed to say a word to be the loudest voice in the room. Her face twisted, anger, fear, shame, all at once. "You planned this," she whispered, but it wasn't accusation. It was awe. She tried one last time to recover. "People make mistakes," she said, voice trembling. "We're human. We grow. We fail. We come back stronger." But no one clapped. No one smiled. Her voice trembled again, then broke entirely. She stepped away from the mic, looking for a way out that didn't exist. Her hands shook. Her shoulders collapsed. And for the first time since she reinvented herself as this untouchable goddess of self-help, she looked small. Powerless. Real. I didn't leave. I stood. Watched. Let the silence devour her while she stood in the rubble of her own illusions. And that silence, my silence, was the loudest thing she had ever heard. It was her birthday, because of course it was, and she insisted on a small, sacred gathering at her parents' house, something she swore was just for healing and closure, not a celebration, not after everything that's happened. She wanted a circle, candles, a soft playlist of sad indie music, and words like forgiveness and growth passed around like hors d'oeuvres. I didn't want to go, but her mother called me personally, almost whispering through the phone, begging me to come, saying, "Maybe if she sees you, if she really sees you, she'll come back to reality." So I showed up. Not for her, but for the moment I knew was coming, the moment when her fantasy would finally snap under the weight of real consequences. The room was full. Her parents, her sister, two of her coworkers, Clara, even the affair partner, Jason, awkwardly posted in the back, pretending to admire a ceramic incense holder. When she saw me walk in, her whole face stiffened, and for once, she didn't have a smile ready. "You came," she said, as if she hadn't been texting me neutral little peace offerings for a week straight, trying to bait me into being the forgiving one. I didn't respond. I just took a seat, crossed my arms, and waited. She lit her little candle and started talking. About mistakes. About healing. About how two people can both be right and both be wrong, and how truth isn't always linear. Jason shifted uncomfortably when she used the word sacred. Clara raised an eyebrow. Her father looked like he was chewing glass. And then she made the mistake of turning toward me, that familiar performative voice dripping from her mouth as she said, "And I just want to say, in front of everyone, that I'm sorry you felt betrayed." That was it. That sentence, that coward's apology, detonated every restraint I had left. I stood up slowly. That I felt betrayed? I repeated, my voice rising, not yelling, but sharp enough to slice through the music and chatter. Not that you betrayed me. Not that you lied, cheated, gaslit, rewrote our marriage in your journals like it was just a chapter in your little self-discovery series. No, just that I felt something inconvenient. Her face went pale. "This isn't the place for, no, it's perfect," I snapped, stepping forward now, closer to the center of the room. "Because everyone here has heard your side. Your delicate little story of spiritual awakening. But they haven't heard mine." She shook her head, trying to stop it, but I was already speaking. "You told people I didn't love you. That I didn't see you. But I saw everything, every lie, every text, every night you snuck out of bed thinking I was too numb to notice. I saw the way you flinched when I touched you. The way you started locking your phone, deleting playlists, hiding receipts. Please stop, she hissed. You're embarrassing yourself. No. I cut her off, loud now, loud enough that the music was finally killed. I'm embarrassing you. You're not some broken phoenix. You're just a coward with a rebrand. Her coworkers looked stunned. Clara actually nodded. Her mother looked like she was about to cry. Her father had turned to Jason, staring holes through his skull. You want to talk about emotional safety? I said, pointing at Jason. How safe was it bringing him into my home while I was working 2 jobs to support your dream of selling overpriced notebooks and recycled affirmations? Jason opened his mouth, tried to say something, but I turned toward him with a calm, measured glare. Don't. You. Speak. He closed it. You want a spiritual awakening? I continued, stepping closer to her. Here it is. You destroyed your marriage not because you were finding yourself, but because you were bored. You were greedy. And now you want to turn your own self-sabotage into a brand. You have no idea what it's been like being with you. She snapped suddenly, voice shrill and trembling, eyes wild. You're like a brick wall. Cold. Unfeeling. You act like a martyr, but you're just hollow. No, I said, my voice dropping lower now. I was steady. You called that boring. I was loyal. You called that controlling. I gave you everything, and you called that nothing, because it didn't feed your ego loud enough. You always made me feel small, she said, voice cracking now. You made me feel invisible. No, I said, flatly. You felt small next to someone who didn't need applause to exist. The room was silent. Frozen. Someone was filming. I could feel it, but I didn't care. She was shaking now. Tears finally breaking. But I wasn't done. You didn't outgrow me, I said, stepping back. You outgrew your own mask. And now the real you? No one's clapping for that. I walked to the door. Calm. Controlled. As she stood there, sobbing, shivering, reaching out as if I'd turn around. But I didn't. I just nodded to her father, glanced at Jason, who now looked like a child caught in the middle of a house fire, and left her there, exposed, broken, surrounded by the wreckage she swore was a temple. She moved out 2 weeks later, after the fundraiser turned funeral, after her inbox dried up and her bank froze the remaining funds in the shared LLC account. The apartment she landed in was 2 hours away, a gray block in a smaller city with no friends, no clients, no curious eyes that remembered her from the wellness conferences or the Instagram reels where she spoke about radical honesty. The job she found was behind the counter at a candle shop in a dying strip mall part-time, under a manager who didn't care about her brand or her energetic alignment. Jason vanished within 3 days of the collapse. No breakup. No farewell. Just gone, his number disconnected, his socials wiped. Apparently, spiritual devotion has limits when exposed to sunlight. She sent me one message. Just one. I still love you. I stared at it for a while before replying. Strange. I don't even remember your name anymore. Her family stopped speaking to her. Her sister blocked her on every app. Her mother refused to answer her calls, and her father returned a long, handwritten letter in the original envelope, marked refused. Address unknown. Former friends didn't ghost her, they expelled her, cutting ties like they were infected. On the street, people crossed to the other side. A few brave ones whispered. Most just looked away. She had become something to avoid. One night, a month after she disappeared from our town, I heard a knock. Not loud. Just a hesitant, uneven tap. I opened the door and found her standing there, thin, shivering, soaked from the rain. Her eyeliner was smudged, but she wasn't wearing makeup anymore. Her hands trembled. Her voice cracked the second she said my name. I didn't move. I didn't invite her in. She started crying. Not like before, not theatrical or loud. Just quiet, exhausted sobs that racked her shoulders. I don't know who I am anymore, she whispered. I ruined everything. I thought I was healing, but I was just running. She looked up at me, eyes swollen. I miss the way you used to look at me. Like I was the only thing that mattered. I said nothing. She stepped forward. Please, can you just talk to me? She asked, voice shaking. Not as my ex. Not as the man I hurt. Just as the person who used to know me best. I stood there in the doorway, watching a stranger in the shape of my past. She wasn't my wife anymore. She wasn't even the woman I once tried to save. She was the aftermath. And I felt nothing. No warmth. No pity. Not even hate. Just silence where a future used to be. She waited. Desperate. Hollow. I stepped forward, lowered my voice, and said, You burned the map. Don't ask me for directions. Then I closed the door. Thank you for listening to the story. I'm curious, Where are you listening from? And did it hit the way you hoped it would?